Throwing money at stuff, I actually think ruins it. You're giving yourself a false sense of hope. And so I'm actually a fan of only throwing money at it when you have a machine that turns $1 into $2 and you know that this is working, as opposed to throwing money at something early on and you get a little bit of artificial boost. Like it has to be fuel to the fire. It can't create the fire.
Hi, I'm Jason Harris, and you're listening to So on Science. Fast forward your marketing mind in about 20 minutes. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Sam Parr, founder of The Hustle, among many other things. One of America's fastest growing media companies with a focus on millennials, tech, and culture. Their signature product is a daily email that's changing how young professionals consume news. Each morning, they send users a daily dose of irreverent, offbeat, and informative takes on the headlines and trends across business and tech. Sam also runs HustleCon.
I used to, yes.
Okay, this is going to be. I like the interactive bio is really fun.
So, let me do it. It's my life. I can do it for you. It'll be really easy. So, the Hustle it's a daily email. It was acquired by HubSpot like a year ago, and we reached like over maybe. It's for sure over 2 million, about 2.5 million people a day. And HustleCon, that was our conference, and I actually launched that first before the newsletter even existed, and we would have thousands of people come. But once the pandemic hit, we had to shut it down.
Sam is also the founder and host of My First Million podcast, a weekly entrepreneurial podcast where he does a deep dive into different business opportunities and helps explain how to pounce on them. Today's episode theme is about how to hustle with Sam Parr. We're going to dive right in. What is the Sam Parr origin story? How did you get into the business that you are now in?
I'm from Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri. I went to school in college in Nashville, Tennessee. And while I was there, I met this guy. You know Mike Wolfe? Have you heard of American Pickers, the TV show?
Yes, it's a big show.
I met Mike on the street and I became friends with him, and he asked me to help create one of his stores. So, like on the show, they buy old junk and they sell it in the stores. Well, I ran the store in Nashville, or helped run, and I learned about entrepreneurship with him because he was a pretty baller entrepreneur. And eventually I opened up a hot dog stand to like service like all the tourists coming to the area. And after doing that, I realized selling stuff outside is really hard when it's 100 degrees. So I started some internet businesses and kind of Googled and figured out, and just Googled like, where do internet companies start, or like where do they live? And someone online said Silicon Valley. And so I just dropped out of school and moved to Silicon Valley. And I started a couple internet companies, one or two that were eventually acquired. And when I was looking for something new to do, a new company to start, I created that event called HustleCon just as a way to kill time, kind of. And unexpectedly, it worked out. And the reason it worked out was I was really good at content marketing. And so I kind of thought, content is kind of fun. What's a media company all about? And I just kind of studied it and launched a media company.
What was it like when you went to Silicon Valley by yourself? Like, how, you just showed up there and you're like, there's a lot happening here. Let me in.
I just showed up. It was pretty easy. It was really easy. I just showed up, but it was cool because everyone else was also just showing up and everyone was open-minded to strangers, but it was easy. I mean, it was hard because I was so poor. I used to like joke to myself and say I was on the Whole Foods scholarship, because in reality I would just steal from the buffet, and like, because I like didn't have any money. I used to get like, like the old trick where you like get 2 slices of pizza in the one container and you only pay for 1 slice of pizza. That was my move. So I used to do things like that all the time because I was so poor. So it was hard like to pay for stuff, but it worked out.
And how did you have the cojones to start HustleCon and expect people would show up? Like, did you have any connections, background, network?
No, I was a nobody. And I knew I could write because I kind of I was teaching myself, and I was convinced that I could use copywriting to get people to become excited. And so I just created a blog where I would write really cool articles about each speaker, and then I would post it on Hacker News and Reddit, and it would get kind of popular, and I would collect the emails of the people who came to the website because they would enter their email to learn more, and I would email them and I just convinced them to come. And the first time I did it, it wasn't that big. I think I made $60,000 in 6 weeks, and 300 people showed up. The next time we did it, it was like $250,000 and like 600 people showed up. So it wasn't like huge, but it wasn't small, I guess. But I just did it through blogging.
And how did you track speakers that people would want to show up and see?
I kind of lied. So like I had these like 11 or 12 people who I wanted to speak, and I did like the thing where you like ask your mom for something and you say like, well, dad said it was okay. And then you do the same thing to your dad. You say, well, mom said it was okay. So I just invited like 10 people, and I worded it in such a way that I was actually not lying, but in reality, it felt like I was lying, because I would say like, hey, these are the 9 other speakers who are going to attend or who are going to
Amazing.
speak. Do you want to be part of that? Like something like that. And I got lucky, and like most all of them said yes.
That's incredible. I love what you have to do at the beginning to make something happen, because you're like, you've got nothing to lose and you need to manifest it, or you've got nothing, or you're still stealing pizza.
I think people like, I'm kind of working on new projects right now, and so I'm starting stuff from scratch, and I'm trying not to talk about it publicly too much because I'm trying not to use my brand, my personal brand, until like I know it works, and then I'll talk about it. But anyway, and so I'm in like this early stage, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I was in this like scrappy mode for like 2 years when I was younger. This was really hard. It's very challenging.
You might have a scrappy mindset, but you're not approaching it in a scrappy way. You're not beg, borrowing, and stealing to launch these things now.
No, not anymore. No, but I'm trying not to throw money at the problem, because I think that can actually make it bad. So I kind of like assume in my head that like, all right, I'm poor, broke, and like hungry. Like I got my PhD, poor, hungry, and driven, and like I have to make this work, and it's very challenging and it's very stressful.
It's kind of good to go back to that mentality, though, because you could always throw money at something to make it happen, but there's a different reward when you don't.
Or throwing money at stuff, I actually think ruins it. Like it's like you get a false sense. It's like it's, for example, a lot of people who create cool D2C products or create cool media products like a newsletter, they're always like, oh, I'm going to advertise right away. I'm going to like buy ads on a certain platform in order to get new customers. But I'm like, dog, this is like you're giving yourself a false sense of hope, because you are able to throw money at this and getting customers, but you might have a leaky ship. You don't know if people are going to come back and buy this again. You don't know if it's actually good enough that people are going to talk about organically. And so I'm actually a fan of only throwing money at it when like you have a machine that turns $1 into $2 and you know that this is working, as opposed to throwing money at something early on and you get a little bit of artificial boost. Like it has to be fuel to the fire. It can't create the fire.
I love that, because you can always buy an audience or followers or whatever, but it's not a core audience, right? It's just numbers.
Yeah.
You're just buying numbers. So how did you go from HustleCon to get HustleCon off the ground? How did you decide you were going to turn that into one of the first kind of email newsletter successes? How did you have that idea? Do you remember when you had that idea?
Yeah. So basically what I would do is I would like host this event, and I would make like hundreds of thousands of dollars or $100,000. And I was like 23. So I was like hood rich. So like I put that money in the bank, and then I would go and travel for like on my motorcycle for 6 months and like live like a dream 23-year-old, whatever lifestyle. And while I was doing that, so I would host the event, travel, host the event, travel. And I did that a couple times. And then while I was traveling, I read the biography of Ted Turner. That's the guy who started CNN. And I was really inspired by it, because I'm not entirely from the South. I'm from Missouri, but people in New York sometimes call me Southern. And he was Southern. He was from Georgia. And he had this big old building in New York, in the in Midtown Manhattan, called the Time Warner Center. That's that was his building, one of his buildings, and he created CNN. And I was really inspired that this outsider can create this huge, culturally relevant media business. And so I was really inspired by it. And so at this point, we had made probably 500. I think we had $500,000 in the bank from just doing these conferences. And the conferences started with $0. So like I think the only money I ever put into the company was like a MailChimp subscription, which is $20 a month. Like it was like maybe 500. Like it was like close to nothing. And so anyway, we made all these profits from this event, and I was like, well, events suck. Like running events really stinks. Like if it rains, you're screwed. It's very stressful. Like things can really screw it up. I don't want to be the event person. What else can we do? And I'd read this guy, Ted Turner, I read his biography, and I was like, let's do media. That sounds cool. And I researched all the different ways that media companies were built. And it seemed like the newsletter strategy was something that fit what I was good at. And a lot of people weren't doing it at the time. And so I was like, I think there's an opportunity to do the newsletter thing. And I think I'm talented at that. So it might be like a perfect combination.
So when you started the hustle, were you doing all the writing?
Yeah.
And how did you determine every week what you were going to research and write about? Was that stressful?
Yeah, it was hard. So when we started, we weren't really doing news. I was just writing like 5 articles a day. I mean, I was just writing a ton of articles. And I would do a bunch of different things in order to come up with content. The first thing is I had multiple personalities. So like there's Sam Parr, there's Sid Finch, there's Steph Whitfield. Who else did I have? Steve Garcia. That's Steve Jobs and Jerry Garcia. He's the guy who likes to take LSD. And like I would write these articles from Steve Garcia, and we wrote about microdosing, and then Steph Whitfield wrote about like what it was like to be a woman in tech, and then like I had like all these like personas, and I would just like have fun with it and write these like opinion pieces. But then also what I would do is I would go to Reddit and I would go to Hacker News and I would look at what the top articles of the week were, and I would look at what the comments were and the critique and the analysis and the feedback on that like a particular news story or article, and I would like write about it in a different and unique way. For example, do you remember when Steve Harvey was like the the presenter for Miss America, and he read the second place winner as the first place winner?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Well, when he did that, he showed the card kind of really quick. And some people were like joking about this on Reddit, but I kind of like really looked closely at it at the card, and it was like horribly designed. The card was actually quite confusing. Like it had the second place winner. Her name was actually bigger than the first place winner. It was very confusing. So I understand why he made that mistake. I don't remember exactly what we wrote, but I was like, Steve Harvey wasn't wrong. The designer of this card was wrong.
Right.
And like I wrote that article and that got viewed like 1 million times.
Amazing.
So like we would do like little things like that, like consistently. And then we realized that the news is actually better because there's news every hour, every day, versus just like evergreen articles I would write. And so that's how we kind of switched to news.
So Steve Harvey's mistake helped the hustle take off. How did you have it make revenue?
So for the longest time, it was just ads. And like, I always thought, I was like, I think this could make like 20 or 30 or $40 million a year in revenue. But then now, like today, I realized it could actually make like 100 or more in revenue. Like we sold our company, but some of our friends and competitors who didn't sell are knocking on the door of $100 million in revenue. So I didn't actually, I didn't realize how big that could get. But then we also made money through subscriptions, and subscriptions also could be way bigger than I thought. So we had this thing called Trends, which was like a weekly email that went out, and it was only $300 a year. And you also got access to a community.
Yep.
We launched that kind of incorrectly. Looking back, we should have charged way more money and done a few things a little bit differently, but that was still making many millions of dollars a year in subscription revenue. So we made money through advertising, we made money through subscription revenue, and for a while we made money through conferences.
That's amazing. And then at what point were you like, I want to sell, still kind of be, connected to it, but not be, not deal with all the hardships of running it?
My goal throughout life, like starting at age 19, I was like, I want to be like financially independent at age 30, and I want to work backwards from there. And so my goal when I started the business was to sell in like around the age of 30. And when the pandemic hit, I got freaked out a little bit. I was freaked out about like everything, just like everyone else was. And a couple companies hollered at us to sell, and they were always talking to us. People were always messaging us to buy us, but the pandemic hit, and I also had gotten really sick. I got Lyme's disease, and my face was all paralyzed, and I was like freaked out. I was like, man, I'm scared. Like I was like, I don't know, my face is ever going to get better. I don't feel good. The pandemic is here. Like I'm pouncing on this opportunity. I'm selling this sucker. And so I decided to do that, and we sold in February of 2021.
Do you ever regret selling, or are you glad you did it?
I don't regret selling. I'm glad I did it. So I acknowledge that we could have sold for like way, way more, and it could have been a way, way bigger business. But I had a personal number in mind, and I hit it, and I'm happy to have hit that. I regret that I was in the situation that I had to sell. So, for example, I owned the vast majority of the business, but I didn't own 100% of the business. And if I owned 100% of the business, I would have just like paid myself like a huge salary every year and been like, that's good. Let's just run this forever. And I would have I would hired more. Instead, I ran it like I didn't pay myself a lot of money as we were going. So like I didn't make like a substantial sum until we sold. I wish I had done it the other way though. And so I wouldn't ever have had to sell. But no, I don't regret selling. It's awesome.
Do you think that part of your hustle and being successful was your lack of responsibility and your youthful naivete?
Well, that's like saying like, is it luck or not? And
Yeah.
yeah, I acknowledge that like there's a ton of luck involved and a ton of like privilege here. Like when I graduated college, I got a little bit of, I got like an athletic scholarship, and also my parents helped support me until they were like, you either have to play a sport and get a scholarship, or if you quit, which I did, you've got to go get a job. But we'll like help you. It will help you regardless, but you have to contribute. So I didn't have any debt when I graduated. Had I had to make what's a debt payment, like 600 or 500 to 2000, some in that huge ballpark depending on your interest rate. If I had to make that debt payment every month, it would have been incredibly challenging. I didn't have any children. I'm married now, but I don't have any kids. So like the fact that made a huge difference, not having any kids.
Yeah.
I was naive. That made a huge difference. I actually think I would have done it regardless if I was naive or not, because I'm not naive anymore. I'm still doing it. But the youth, the health, the born to a good family, that all helped.
You're now going back to your PhD, acting like you're poor, hungry, and driven. It's part of your hustle. What are you really great at? And what are blind spots or deficiencies that you now know you have to hire for because you tried it and you sucked at it?
I'm crazy good at starting and like getting early customers and not letting fear hold me back. I'm very good at that. So like I can have an idea on a Monday, and by Wednesday I can have a website live, and by Thursday I can get a customer. I've done that dozens of times, and it's very easy for me. Not easy, it's very straightforward for me. Like I'm pretty good at executing that. I'm very good at hiring. I'm good at spotting interesting people and convincing them to come join me. I'm incredibly bad at organization. And I would say I'm not that good of a CEO because I'm pretty emotional, and I can get angry at people, or I can get really happy with people when sometimes it's a little bit better to be even keel.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm doing now is I'm going to try and get it to $600,000 in revenue and then hire a CEO. I actually don't think that we should try to fix our weakness, because the things that make a person organized often are the thing. Like organization requires perfectionism, it requires patience, it requires like being like incredibly thoughtful. Starting something usually requires recklessness. It requires like, I don't know, but we're just going to figure it out. Let's just go. Like
That's exactly
it requires
right.
the opposite of perfectionism. And so my opinion is like, embrace it and don't try to change yourself. Instead, just go harder on that one thing and specialize. And then beyond that, you just hire people and just say, this is your job. Your job's to do this. My job will be to do this. And we'll both kick ass at our jobs. But yeah, I'm not organized. Like I'm terribly unorganized.
For people that are starting businesses or pivoting, do you have any advice about how to make things work?
Yeah, like I think most people just like overthink things too much. And I'm like, well, have you gotten on the phone and just cold called someone and try to get them just like try to sell them on the phone? And they're like, no, but I've been like blogging and like writing on Twitter. Where I'm like, dude, like just get on the phone like literally in the next 10 minutes and start calling people and try to get the sale done. And if they don't buy, figure out why and then alter the product, and then like just do that literally every day for 100 days. And like it's very simple. It's hard, but it's simple. And so I think people overthink things. I also think they think too long about it. So I'm a big fan of momentum. So you can spend a lot of time, I think, deciding if what you want to work on is actually what you want to work on. But then once you make that decision, I try to get traction and results, even if they're small and unorganized. I try to get them immediately as fast as possible because the momentum encourages me and I keep going and it becomes the reality.
That's great advice right there. A lot of what we talk about, we talk to a lot of CMOs at big brands, and we talk about marketing and soul and science. And soul is leading with your heart, and science is leading with your head. And it sounds like, from the don't overthink things and get the momentum, that's a lot of going with your gut. But to build businesses like you have, it's also results and subscribers and listeners and numbers and to get advertisers and et cetera. Are you into like looking through the data, and at what point are people dropping off and why? And how do you measure the analytical with the gut as you run businesses?
You're a big music guy. So like to me, building a business is kind of like writing a hit song. Like on one hand, there's a lot of commonalities behind the hit songs. Like they're in this range of beat per minutes and like they have the hook here and they've got like and there's like 18 or 20 different chord structures that they're potentially fall in. And so that's like the science, but then the art is like, like no computer model ever said that this guy named David Bowie could dress like a woman and wear paint on his face and be considered like a sex symbol and be considered like amazing and cool. Like that's just like he's just a freak. He's just artistic. He's just cool. It's hard to explain. That's just innate talent. And so I think early on I rely on art, and then later on I can definitely go way more into the science, but I don't let the science hold me back because I think that a lot of the best shit, it's not going to be created in an Excel sheet. The Excel sheet will help with a lot of the decisions, but not all the cool decisions. Like I think Jeff Bezos was like, yeah, at Amazon, like our data repeatedly showed that we could raise prices and people would continue buying for us at the same conversion rate. But like our whole shtick is that we're low cost, we're low price. So we're just going to keep them low.
Right.
So like that's an example where you shouldn't listen to data. But then there's other ways where it's like, oh, this copy works better. Let's do that. So I can do both. But I remember I was trying to get a loan for the business and the banker was like, yeah, send me a cohort analysis. And I was like, what the fuck is a cohort analysis? Like, what is a cohort? And he was like, so I like acted silly. And I told someone at my company, I was like, what's a cohort analysis? And they explained it to me. And I was like, we can do that. And my employee was like, yeah, dude, I've been doing it. And so anyway, like I've gotten pretty good at hiring and letting them do their job, but I didn't know anything.
That's amazing. I love the building a business is like writing a hit song. I think that's a really good analogy. And it's also, part of a business, it's a collection of people and how they hang together. There's a science to how you hire and who you hire, but then there's a chemical thing that happens that you can't predict of how they're going to be when they're together.
Yeah, that's the art.
Oh, that's the art. Are you doing, now that you've sold and you're starting new things, how do you determine what you're going to put your, just money into, what you're going to put your time into?
Yeah. Have you heard of Ikigai? Do you know what that is?
No.
It's like this Japanese concept or way of life, I guess. And it looks kind of like a Venn diagram with 4 circles. And it's basically like what the world needs, what you're talented at, what you enjoy doing, and what can make money. And I like trying to like use those kind of 4 things and find something right in the middle. But when I'm working, right when I sold, I started doing some stuff like, I angel invested a ton. I angel invested in like 60 companies. And then I was like, this is so fucking lame. I just give these guys like a check and I don't hear from them for 5 years. This is so boring. Yes, it will make money, but it is like just so boring. I don't do anything. I just give money and I hopefully hear back from them in 5 years. Like I might as well go buy a bunch of lottery tickets. And so like lately I've been like, I changed my opinion a few months ago. I was like, I'm just going to do stuff that's dope. I'm just going to work on stuff that's amazing. And I have a feeling that whatever I work on, it can make a lot of money. So I kind of have been over optimizing just for like what's sick, what's awesome, like just what's exciting. So anyway, I'm like doing things that give me energy because I found that anything that gives me energy, it's more likely to succeed.
So tell me about your big investment property that you just built.
I have been buying places to do Airbnb. I've always wanted to do it, but I never had enough money to do it. I've always wanted to create a hotel And it's that creating a hotel is pretty expensive. So instead I got into Airbnbs. And so I bought my first property. I've got 3 properties now, but the main one you're talking about is a ranch. It's called Marathon Ranch. So I bought a 20-acre ranch in Fredericksburg, Texas, which is like 2 hours outside of Austin. It's beautiful. And it's like a fitness Airbnb type of thing. And so I've got like a gym there, and you can hunt. It's pretty neat. And so that's like my Airbnb. It's been a really fun project. It's making $13,000 a month in sales, so it's paying for itself and making a good profit. But I needed to get to like 15,000 or 20,000 a month to make like really good money.
And what motivates you now that is different than what motivated you in the early days?
Before, what motivated me was like not necessarily wanting to retire, but not wanting to be like destitute and poor. I'd been poor before, and I was like, this is horrible. I want to have a family. And like, I remember one time, my parents didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I remember one time I got braces. And when I got older, I was like, hey, Mom, remember when you gave me braces? She was like, yeah, that was $2,000. And I paid for it on my debit card, and I had $5,000 in my checking account. And I was like, that is wild. I can't believe you did that for me. Thank you. And I was like, I want to get really rich. So like when my kids want braces or whatever, like it ain't no thing. Like, you know, we can just swipe the card and it's no big deal. So that was the motivation early on. Now the motivation is just live a meaningful life. I think that it's pretty crazy that like a lot of people, I don't think, whether they just don't want to or because they're not fortunate or lucky enough, which I understand, can like kind of reflect and be like, all right, like, am I spending my time how I think like makes me feel good in my heart? Am I able to spend time with my family? Am I able to contribute positively to the world? And I'm kind of just thinking it like I'm just want to live a really well balanced and healthy life, and I want to live for a long ass time.
Well, I love the Ikigai. I'm going to definitely look that up. I love the build a business is like writing a hit song. PhD, I'll never forget. I like that you were inspired by Ted Turner.
Do you like Ted Turner? You're a big CNN guy, right?
I am a CNN guy. CNN Plus didn't last very long though.
Yeah, but I know that you and Biden are boys. You were homies with Biden before he was president.
That's true. And then I think the Steve Harvey mistake helped build the hustle is great. And I love you, the Sam Parr schizophrenic. All right. Who are some of your role models that either now, current, or when you were younger that you sort of emulated or looked up to?
I always love like people who have like a punk rock attitude and beat to their own and live their life like march to the beat of their own drum. I've really enjoyed reading about Laird Hamilton lately. Do you know who that is?
Of course, yeah, big wave surfer.
He's like that good looking big wave surfer guy, and I love like how like focused and driven he is on like something that it's kind of easy to dismiss. Where it's like, dude, this is just surfing. This is a game. Like, why do you care so much about this? And he like kind of like is so focused on it and dedicated his life to it. So I'm actually incredibly fascinated by him. Do you know who Felix Dennis is? He wrote this book called How to Get Rich. And it's horribly titled, but it's all about how to get rich. But his business, he was kind of like Richard Branson, but a more vulgar and more drug addict-y version of Richard Branson. He was like, he got popular because he created all these magazines and he like loved to smoke crack. Like he loved crack. That was his drug of choice, crack and cocaine. And he like wrote this book. So when he died, he was worth $700 million. And he invented a bunch of magazines, including Maxim magazine. And he was like, I lived life to the fullest, but I wish he's like, there was like 5 years where I did cocaine and crack and I just loved drugs. But he was like, if I could do it all over again, I would have gotten rich and then spent all my time writing poetry and like planting trees. And he's got this book called How to Get Rich that like kind of changed my life and my life perspective because he did a really good job of balancing having fun, not the crack part, but the other fun, like having fun and making money.
Do you have a favorite quote or mantra that drives you?
If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're probably right.
I love that. That's a good one. Thanks for being on the podcast, Sam. You are a fascinating individual. I've always been so impressed with how hardcore you go after things.
Likewise.
Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, Tyler Nielsen, Emma Swanson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.